He put a plate on the floor for me, next to the dog bowl, in the house I built with my own 2 hands. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, just watched. They thought I was just an old carpenter, worn out and worthless. They thought they had broken me. They were about to find out that I don't just build foundations, I tear them down too. If you're listening to this, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. My name is Arthur, and this is the story of how my masterpiece became my prison. I know the smell of sawdust. It's the scent of my life. 40 years of turning rough timber into something smooth, something lasting. I build things to last. I thought I had built my family the same way. Solid, dependable. I was wrong. It was Thanksgiving morning. The November air was sharp, the kind of cold that settles deep into the arthritis in my knuckles. I rubbed them against my jeans. The ache was familiar, a carpenter's companion. It didn't matter. I was going to see my granddaughter Emma. That was all that mattered. Or so I told myself. The drive felt strange. I was heading to Oakwood Lane, the big colonial house at the end of the street. It felt strange to call it my daughter's house, because I built that house. Every joist, every cabinet, every shingle. It was my masterpiece. Mine and Mary's. Mary was my wife. We poured 2 years of sweat and savings into that place. When our daughter Clara married David 5 years ago, we gave it to them. A gift. A foundation. We moved into a small apartment across town. We left our dream home behind so they could start building theirs. We thought that's what parents do. We sacrifice. We didn't know we were sacrificing ourselves. Mary left me 2 years ago. The cancer was quick, ruthless. The light went out of my life when she died. Thanksgiving used to be loud, filled with her laughter, her terrible singing while she cooked. Now it was quiet. Lonely. The apartment was too empty without her. The silence was deafening. And the loneliness? It was a heavy blanket I couldn't shake off. I looked at the passenger seat of my old Ford truck. A rocking horse sat there. Solid oak, stained a warm honey color, a soft yarn mane. I had spent the last month crafting it, sanding the wood until it felt like silk. It was for Emma. She was 3 years old, the only bright spot left in my world, but even that light felt dim lately. I hadn't seen Clara or Emma much. David got a big promotion, investment firm. He was the kind of man who wore suits that cost more than my monthly pension. He talked about assets and liquidity, not people, not feelings. Their lives had changed. They ran in fancy circles now, circles that didn't seem to include a 68-year-old retired carpenter. I tried to ignore the sting, but it was getting harder. The distance was growing, and I had a sinking feeling it was intentional. A few weeks ago I stopped by with a toy for Emma. David met me at the door. He didn't even take the chain off. "Arthur, you can't just drop by unannounced," he said, his voice tight. He glanced over his shoulder nervously. "We have a schedule. A schedule. For family." I stood on the porch I built, feeling like a stranger. He hadn't invited me in then, either. That was the beginning of the end. I turned onto Oakwood Lane. My stomach tightened. The street was lined with cars, sleek black sedans, BMWs, things I couldn't even name, gleaming under the weak November sun. My rusty Ford looked tired next to them. Embarrassed, almost. This wasn't a family Thanksgiving. It looked like a business event. A high-stakes poker game where I was the lowest chip. I parked the truck. I grabbed the rocking horse. It felt heavy in my arms. I walked up the path I had paved myself. Stone by stone, my back ached with the memory. Through the large bay windows I installed, I could see the party inside. It was packed, and something felt wrong. Women in sparkling dresses, men in sharp suits, crystal glasses clinking, laughter spilled out. It sounded loud. It sounded loud. Forced, like a performance. I saw a woman in a sharp red blazer, pointing at the crown molding. My crown molding. She looked impressed. Her smile was too wide, too predatory. I didn't recognize anyone. I hesitated before ringing the bell. Suddenly, I felt very small, very old, very out of place. I brushed the dust off my jacket. It was my best jacket, wool, warm, but it wasn't a suit. My boots were clean, but they were work boots. They were all I had. I took a deep breath and rang the bell. The sound was swallowed by the noise inside. Clara opened the door. She looked beautiful. A tight silver dress, heels that looked painful, but her face was tight. stressed. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Dad," she said. It wasn't quite a greeting, it was an acknowledgement. Her eyes darted over my shoulder, checking the street. Then they scanned my clothes. They lingered on my boots. A flicker of embarrassment crossed her face. It stung, a sharp, sudden pain right in the chest. "Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart," I said. My voice felt rough. I held up the horse. "For Emma." Clara glanced at the horse. Her expression flickered. I saw a moment of genuine appreciation. The little girl I knew was still in there. Somewhere. But it was quickly replaced by stress. And something else. Fear. "Oh, Dad, it's lovely," she said quickly. Her voice was high, brittle. "But it's so chaotic in here. David is really on edge. On edge. It's Thanksgiving, Clara." "It's not just Thanksgiving, Dad," she whispered, pulling me slightly into the foyer, away from the noise. "His boss is here. Mr. Harrison." Then she nodded towards the woman in the red blazer. "And that's Janice. She's a real estate agent. A very high-end one." Janice. The predator. A real estate agent? On Thanksgiving. The knot in my stomach tightened. Why would they need a high-end real estate agent at a family dinner? Unless it wasn't a family dinner at all. Before I could process that thought, David appeared behind Clara. He filled the doorway. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance, a smell I had grown to despise. "Arthur, glad you could make it," he boomed. A politician's smile, fake and wide, but he didn't step aside. He kept his body subtly blocking the entrance, like a bouncer at an exclusive club. "Hello, David. Quite the party," I said. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Yes, well, this is a crucial night for us," he said. He lowered his voice, a mock confidentiality, networking, and perhaps a little business. He winked. He glanced down at my boots. His smile thinned. The disdain was clear. "Listen, Arthur," he continued, his tone shifting. The fake warmth vanished. "Things are a bit more formal tonight than maybe you're used to." The implication hung in the air. I was too simple, too rough around the edges, too embarrassing for their sophisticated life. I gripped the working horse tighter. My knuckles turned white. "I'm here to see my family, David." "Of course," David said, his voice dripping with impatience. "But this is also my home, and my event." He steered me further down the hallway, away from the party, towards the kitchen. I saw Janice, the real estate agent, watching us. She whispered something to David as we passed. "Make sure the staging is perfect, David," she said, her eyes raking over me. "We don't want any distractions." Staging, distractions. She was talking about me. David forced a laugh. "Don't worry, Janice. I'm handling it." He pushed me into the hallway near the garage entrance. "It's just that the seating arrangement," he said, his tone hardening. "It's very precise, very delicate. Precise. David, it's a dinner table, not a treaty negotiation. It's a business opportunity, Arthur," he snapped. The mask was slipping. We had a few last-minute RSVPs. Mr. Harrison brought his wife. Janice stayed. And Mark is here. Mark, David's colleague, a young, ambitious guy who was gunning for the same promotion as David. I'd met him once before. He had a handshake like a dead fish. "Frankly, Arthur," David said, looking me straight in the eye, "we're full." I stared at him. I was sure I had misheard him. "Full? In this massive house?" "A house with a dining hall. I designed specifically to seat 20 people comfortably." "What are you saying, David?" I asked. The cold from outside seemed to sink deeper into my bones. He sighed, exasperated, like I was a stubborn child. David looked over my shoulder. Mark, his rival, was watching us from the living room entrance, a smirk playing on his lips. David saw him. His jaw tightened. He needed to show strength. He needed to show control. He leaned closer to me. His cologne was suffocating. The noise of the party felt miles away. "I'm saying the table is full," he enunciated slowly, as if I were stupid. "There is no seat for you." He looked me up and down again, a flicker of disdain. "Clear as day." And he added, "This is a high-profile event. We need to maintain a certain image. Janice insists on it. An image I didn't fit. A distraction. My throat burned. I couldn't speak. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked past him, into the dining room, the polished mahogany table, the fine china, the massive turkey, golden brown. The smell was rich, buttery. Mary's recipe. They were using Mary's recipe while kicking me out. The cruelty was breathtaking. "There's plenty of food, David," I said. My voice was low, dangerous. "The food was calculate by the caterers," he snapped. His patience was gone. "We don't have enough for unexpected guests." The words hit me like a slap. "Unexpected? I'm not an unexpected guest," I said, my voice trembling slightly with rage. "I'm family." David sneered, a cruel twist of his lips. "In name, perhaps," he said. "But let's be realistic, Arthur. You don't belong here tonight. There's no room and no food for you." The humiliation burned, hot and sharp. It felt like a physical blow. It knocked the wind out of me. I looked at Clara, my daughter, the little girl whose treehouse I built, whose skinned knees I bandaged. I waited for her to say something. Anything to defend me, to tell David he was wrong. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked down at the marble floor. Marble I'd installed myself. Piece by piece, she was ashamed, but she shone silent. Her silence was a betrayal louder than David's insults. And that was the moment my heart started to crack. She chose him. David sighed again. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. He looked annoyed that I was still standing there, that I hadn't just disappeared. "Look, Arthur," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We're not throwing you out on the street, but you can't be in here with the guests. You'll make people uncomfortable." He walked away, toward the kitchen. I stood frozen in the hallway. Clara wouldn't look at me. I heard the rattle of plastic from the kitchen. A cheap, disposable sound. The worst was yet to come. David returned a moment later. He held a flimsy white plastic plate, the kind you use at a cheap barbecue. He walked to a side table in the foyer. An appetizer tray sat there, nearly empty. He scraped the remnants onto the plastic plate. A few cold shrimp, a tiny piece of cheese, some wilted greens, scraps. My stomach turned. He didn't hand me the plate. Instead, he walked over to the corner of the hallway, near the entrance to the garage. It was a dark, cold spot, away from the warmth and light of the party. Their dog's water bowl sat there, a stainless steel bowl, polished and clean. He stopped. He looked at the plate in his hand. Then he looked at the floor. I saw Mark watching again, leaning against the doorframe, enjoying the show. David saw him too. A cruel smile played on David's lips. This wasn't stress. This was intentional. This was a performance for his colleagues. He bent down, and he placed the plastic plate on the floor, right next to the dog bowl. Time stopped. The noise of the party faded away. The air felt thick, suffocating. "There," David said. He gestured to the floor with a flourish, like a waiter presenting a fine meal. "It's all we have left. You can eat here." He paused, making sure I understood the command. "Just stay out of sight," he added, "and don't make any noise." I stared at the plate on the floor. Scraps, like I was a dog begging under the table. 40 years of hard work, of sacrifice, of love, all reduced to a plastic plate of scraps on a cold marble floor, in the house I built. My ears rang. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. The rage was so cold it burned. A few guests nearby gasped. I heard someone chuckle. It was Mark. I saw David's boss, Mr. Harrison, a silver-haired man with cold eyes. He just watched, observing the scene with detached interest. Janice, the real estate agent, smirked. "Efficient," she whispered loudly to Mr. Harrison. They all saw me as less than human. The silence in the room stretched, heavy, deadly. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't break. Something inside me turned to steel. I looked down at the rocking horse still clutched in my arms. I'd thought of Mary. I thought of the sweat and love poured into this home's foundations. I thought of Emma. I carefully, deliberately placed the rocking horse on the side table. It looked beautiful. Solid, real, in a house full of fakes. Then I turned around, and I walked away. I opened the front door. I stepped out into the cold November night. The door clicked shut behind me. A heavy, final sound. It sealed off the warmth, the laughter, the family I thought I had. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. I got into my truck. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The old engine sputtered to life. I drove away from the house on Oakwood Lane. The image of that plastic plate burned into my memory. The cold shrimp, the dog bowl, the silence of my daughter, the laughter of Mark and Janice. I didn't know where I was going. I couldn't face my empty apartment. Not yet. It was too full of memories. Memories of love. I just drove. The city lights blurred. Tears finally started to fall. Hot, heavy tears. Grief, anger. Profound, gut-wrenching betrayal. How could my own daughter allow her husband to treat me like an animal? I ended up at the old harbor, a place where I used to take Clara fishing. She was just a little girl then. Full of joy, I sat on a cold metal bench. I watched the dark water lap against the pylons. The wind off the water was bitter. It matched the chill in my heart. I felt utterly worthless. Maybe David was right. Maybe I was just an old, useless man. A burden. A distraction. The temptation to just fade away quietly was overwhelming. I struggled against the despair. The feeling that I meant nothing. This was the hardest fight of my life. After an hour, the cold forced me back. I drove to my apartment building. The hallway felt sterile, empty. As I walked to my door, my neighbor, Mrs. Evans, opened hers. She was a kind woman. She had known Mary. "Arthur?" she said. Her eyes were filled with concern. "I thought you were at Clara's." She held a plate covered in foil. The smell of turkey wafted out. "You look frozen, Arthur," she said softly. "I have so much left over. Would you like some?" The pity in her eyes stung. I was a charity case now. Accepting her kindness felt like admitting my failure, my isolation. "Thank you, Mrs. Evans," I managed to say. My voice was hoarse. I took the plate. "That's very kind. No one should be alone on Thanksgiving, Arthur," she said. As she closed her door, her son, Tom Evans, appeared in the hallway. He was a financial advisor downtown, a good man. "Arthur, you all right?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "I'm fine, Tom," I lied. Tom hesitated. "Listen, Arthur, I probably shouldn't say anything. Client confidentiality and all that." He leaned closer. "But I saw your son-in-law, David, in my building last week. He wasn't meeting with me. He was meeting with those loan guys on the third floor." "Loan guys?" I asked, confused. "The high-risk lenders, Arthur," Tom said, his voice low. "The kind you go to when the banks say no." He looked desperate. David was desperate for money. That explained the party. The real estate agent. Janice. The need to impress Mr. Harrison. It didn't excuse what he did, but it explained the desperation in his eyes. They were living a lie, and the lie was collapsing. "Thanks, Tom," I said. I went inside my apartment. I closed the door. I sat down in my armchair. The apartment was silent, suffocating. I looked at the picture of Mary on the mantel. Her smiling face seemed to look back at me with sadness. "Where did we go wrong, Mary?" I whispered. I couldn't eat. The food Mrs. Evans gave me sat on the coffee table, untouched. The humiliation festered. It transformed from pain into something else. A cold, hard anger. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was about the accumulation of small slights. The canceled visits. The ignored phone calls. The way David had slowly, deliberately isolated Clara from me. He was erasing me, and he was doing it because he was desperate. If this story is hitting home for you, if you've ever felt discarded or betrayed, please hit the like button and subscribe. It helps our channel grow and bring more stories like mine to light. It means more than you know. Then the phone rang. The sound was jarring in the silent apartment. I knew who it was. I let it ring. It rang until a voicemail picked up. A minute later it rang again. This time I picked it up. I still hoped for an apology. I still hoped my daughter was in there. "Dad?" It was Clara. Her voice was trembling. Hysterical. She was sobbing. I waited. I expected her to say she was horrified by what David did. I expected her to say she was coming to get me. Yes, I said. My voice was cold, flat. Dad, how could you? She cried. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. How could I? How could you just walk out like that? She sobbed. I waited for the apology. It didn't come. You ruined everything, she screamed into the phone. The sound was distorted, shrill. Ruined everything. I asked, bewildered. David was trying to impress Mr. Harrison. She cried. And Janice? She had a buyer lined up. They were ready to make an offer on the house tonight. And you embarrassed him. You embarrassed me. It was true. They were selling the house. They were selling Mary's home. And they were doing it behind my back. Mr. Harrison left early, she continued, her voice rising in panic. He said our family dynamics were concerning, and Mark, he overheard everything. David might lose his promotion, and the sale might fall through. The shock was staggering. She wasn't apologizing. She was scolding me. She valued a promotion and a sale more than her own father's dignity. This cut deeper than anything David had done. This was my daughter. He put a plate on the floor for me. Clara, I said. My voice was rising now, the anger breaking through the ice. On the floor, next to the dog. He was stressed, Dad. She defended him instantly. We have debts. He didn't mean it like that. He put it on the floor. Clara, in front of everyone, in front of Janice and Mark. You're being dramatic, she yelled. And you're so needy since Mom died, always hanging around, wanting attention. We have our own lives, Dad. Needy. The word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. David works hard for everything we have, she said, her voice cold now. We deserve this move. We deserve the penthouse in the city. We deserve a life without your judgment, everything they had, the house I built, the foundation I laid, the debts they racked up. It all clicked into place. The networking, Janice, the real estate agent, liquidating the asset, the high-risk loans Tom mentioned. They needed the house to look perfect, and I was a stain on their perfect image. A liability. I see, I said. The coldness returned, a chilling clarity. I understand perfectly now. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from grief. It was from rage, a cold, focused rage. They thought they could discard me. They thought I was weak, a needy old man. They were wrong. It was time to remind them who I really was, and what Mary had done. I walked over to my closet. I pulled down a heavy locked metal box from the top shelf. It was dusty. It was the box where Mary kept our important documents. I hadn't looked at it since she passed away. My hands trembled as I worked the combination lock. Mary's birthday. The lock clicked open. Inside were the usual papers. Birth certificates. Insurance policies. A bundle of letters Mary had written to me, tied with a ribbon. I touched the ribbon gently, but there was another letter tucked into the side pocket. It wasn't Mary's handwriting. It was from Sandra, Mary's best friend. I opened the letter. It was dated just a month before Mary died. Mary, the letter read, I know you don't want to tell Arthur, but I'm worried about Clara. David came to me yesterday and asked for a loan, a big one. He said his investments went bad. My blood ran cold. He admitted he still hasn't paid back the money he borrowed from Clara before the wedding. The letter continued, Mary, I don't trust him. He keeps asking about the house. About the deed. Make sure you protect Arthur. Make sure David can't take everything. Mary knew. She knew David was financially reckless. She knew he was after the house. And she protected me. I put the letter down. My resolve hardened. The betrayal was deeper than I thought. It wasn't just recent stress. It was years of deception. I looked underneath the letters. In a thick manila envelope was the paperwork related to the house on Oakwood Lane. I pulled it out. I spread the documents on the kitchen table. I remembered the day we signed the papers. We were in the lawyer's office, our old friend, Richard. Mary was already sick then. Her hands were frail, but her mind was sharp as a tack. Sandra's letter confirmed why she was so adamant that day. I read the documents again, slowly, carefully, and then I saw it. The clause that changed everything. It wasn't a standard deed transfer. It wasn't a simple gift. It was something called a life estate. I sat back in my chair, stunned. The implications washed over me. "Mary, you brilliant woman." I had argued with her. I told her we needed to trust our family. But Mary was insistent. She had Richard draft the documents carefully, secretly. The life estate meant that Clara and David owned the house. Technically, but only after I died. Until then, I retained the rights. The right to live there. The right to use the property. And most importantly, I had ultimate control over it. They couldn't sell it without my consent. They couldn't mortgage it. They had forgotten, or perhaps David, in his arrogance and desperation for money, never bothered to read the fine print. And Clara, blinded by her new life, had chosen to forget. They had built their lavish lifestyle, their plans for the future, their arrogance, all on a foundation that still belonged to me. They thought they held all the power. They were very, very wrong. The realization brought a conflict. I had the power to destroy them, to take away everything they valued. But could I do that to my own daughter? Could I make Emma homeless? I was a builder, not a destroyer. But then I pictured the plate on the floor, the sneer on David's face, Claire's voice calling me needy, Janice, the real estate agent, laughing at me, Mark enjoying the show. If I didn't act, this would be my future. Discarded, disrespected, waiting for scraps. I had to protect myself. I had to honor Mary's foresight. Lichas needed to be served. I needed advice. I picked up the phone and called Richard. He had been my lawyer and friend for 30 years. "Arthur," he said, his voice groggy with sleep. "What's wrong?" "It's past midnight." "I need your help, Richard," I said. My voice was steady now, cold. "I need to talk about the life estate." And I found a letter from Sandra. I told Richard everything. The party, the plate on the floor, Janice, the real estate agent, Mark the rival, Tom Evans' warning about the loans, and Sandra's letter about David's history of debt. Richard listened silently. When I finished, I heard him swear, Bersrind. When I finished, I heard him swear, Bersrind. "That arrogant little snake," Richard muttered. Mary saw right through him, Arthur. "We all did, except you." "Is it solid, Richard?" I asked. "It's ironclad, Arthur," he said. "You are the life tenant. You have ultimate control. They can't sell the house. Not without your signature." "What are my options?" I asked. My heart was pounding in my chest. "You can stop the sale, obviously," Richard said. "And given the evidence in Sandra's letter and their blatant attempt to sell without consent, combined with their egregious treatment of you, you have every right to reclaim the property." "Reclaim the property? You mean evict them?" "Yes, Arthur. You can evict them. The house is legally under your control. And frankly, given David's financial situation, they might be damaging the property's value." I took a deep breath. The air felt different now, cleaner. "I want them out, Richard," I said. My voice was firm, final. "As soon as possible. It's Thanksgiving weekend, Arthur," Richard cautioned. "The courts are closed." "I don't care about the courts right now," I said. "I want them served notice tomorrow. I want them to know that their game is over." "All right, Arthur," Richard said. "I'll draw up the papers. Then I'll bring a sheriff's deputy. We'll be there at 10 a.m. I hung up the phone. I wasn't just an old carpenter anymore. I was a man reclaiming his legacy. The next morning, Black Friday, the sky was clear. The air was bitterly cold. I woke up early. I felt a strange sense of calm. The calm before the storm. Richard picked me up at 10 a.m. sharp. A sturdy sheriff's deputy. Deputy Miller was with him. "Are you sure about this, Arthur?" Richard asked as we pulled onto Oakwood Lane. "I've never been more ready," I replied. We pulled into the driveway. David's expensive BMW was parked there. The house looked peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm we were about to unleash. We walked up to the front door. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key. The original key. Now it felt like destiny. I put the key in the lock. It turned smoothly. We entered the house. It was a disaster zone. Empty bottles, dirty plates, the remnants of their lavish party. The smell of stale wine and decay hung in the air. David and Clara were in the living room, sitting on the expensive white sofa. They looked hungover, miserable. They froze when they saw us. "Arthur, what are you doing here?" David demanded, jumping to his feet. His face was red with anger. "After last night, you have some nerve showing up here." "And who are these people?" "This is my lawyer, Richard," I said. My voice echoed in the large room. I felt strong, grounded. "And this is Deputy Miller." "Your lawyer?" David scoffed. He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Are you going to sue us? For hurting your feelings? Get out of my house, Arthur, before I call the police." "Deputy Miller is the police, David," I said quietly. David hesitated. He looked at the deputy, realizing his mistake. "And this," I continued, "is not your house." David laughed again, but it sounded nervous. "What are you talking about, old man? We own this place. You gave it to us." Richard stepped forward. "Precise, deliberate." "Actually, Mr. Harrison, that is incorrect," Richard said, his voice booming in the silent house. "You do not own this house. Not yet." He pulled out the documents, the life estate agreement. He explained the details. Life tenant, remainderman, no right to sell without my consent. David's face went white, pale as the expensive sofa. "And by attempting to do so with the assistance of Miss Janice," Richard continued, his hiss like a gavel coming down, "you have violated the terms of the agreement." David looked at Clara. His eyes were wide with panic. "Clara? What is this? I thought you said the house was ours. You told me the transfer was complete." Clara was trembling. Tears streamed down her face. "I thought it was," she whispered. "I didn't know about this life estate thing." "I gave you the future of this house, Clara," I said. My voice filled with sorrow, not anger. "But the present still belongs to me. Your mother insisted on it." I looked straight at David. I held up Sandra's letter. "She knew about your debts, David. She knew you were reckless. She didn't trust you." David staggered back. As if I had struck him, the truth was a heavy blow. Richard handed David the eviction notice. "Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Harrison," Richard said, "this is a formal notice to vacate the premises due to the violation of the life estate agreement. The life tenant is reclaiming his property." "How long do we have?" Clara whispered. 72 hours, Richard said. David stared at the paper. His mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. "Vacate? You can't be serious. This is our home. My daughter lives here. You should have thought about family before you put a plate on the floor for me," I said. My voice was cold, unyielding. David realized the gravity of the situation. His arrogance dissolved, replaced by sheer terror. "Wait, Arthur, let's be reasonable," he pleaded. His voice was shaking. "We can work this out. Last night was a mistake. I apologize." "It's too late, David," I said. "We need this house." He screamed. He pointed a finger in my face. The desperation turned back into rage. "You can't do this to us." "Why not, David?" "Because we already accepted the offer from Janice's buyer," he yelled. "A cash offer. It was closing next week. But it got worse. The truth Tom Evans hinted at spilled out. We used the deposit," David continued, his voice cracking. "We used it to pay back the high-risk lenders. If the sale falls through, we have to return the deposit. We don't have the money, Arthur. We're ruined. They'll come after us." The depth of their greed, their deception, it was staggering. They had built their entire lives on a lie. And now it was over. Clara finally broke down. She fell to her knees on the marble floor, sobbing hysterically. "Dad, please," she begged. "Please don't do this. We'll lose everything. Think about Emma. Don't make her homeless." "Please, Dad, I'm your daughter." I looked at my daughter, the child I loved more than anything in the world. My heart ached to comfort her, to forgive her. But I couldn't. She had made her choice when she stood silent, when she blamed me. "You made your choice, Clara," I said. My voice trembled with emotion, but my resolve was firm. "You chose greed over family. You chose image over respect. Now you have to live with the consequences." Deputy Miller stepped forward. "You have 72 hours, he said, his voice calm but firm. "I suggest you start packing." We turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the hallway of the house I built, surrounded by the debris of their shattered lives. The sound of Clara's sobbing followed us out the door. 3 days later, I stood across the street. Mrs. Evans and Tom stood beside me. We watched as the moving trucks pulled away, all their expensive furniture, their fancy clothes, their sparkling crystal, all the symbols of their new life, gone. David stood on the lawn, yelling into his phone, probably at Janice or the lenders. Clara sat on the steps, holding Emma, who was crying. My heart ached for my granddaughter, but this was necessary. The fallout for David and Clara was swift and brutal. The news of the failed sale and the eviction spread quickly. The cash buyers sued him for breach of contract. His reputation was ruined. Mr. Harrison fired him, promoting Mark in his place. They had to move into a small, cramped apartment. I heard later that they divorced. The facade had crumbled. I walked into the empty house. The silence was heavy, echoing. I walked through the rooms, remembering the years I spent building this place. The hopes and dreams Mary and I had poured into the foundation. It was tainted now. The memories of that Thanksgiving had seeped into the walls like a stain. I couldn't live here. The dream was dead. As I walked through the hallway, I noticed something left behind. In the corner, near where the dog bowl used to be, the oak rocking horse. They had forgotten it, or perhaps they didn't want a reminder of the love they had thrown away. I picked it up. The wood was smooth under my hands. Solid, real. I sold the house. It sold quickly. The craftsmanship was impeccable, after all. I took the money from the sale. I did something that would have made Mary proud. I bought an old warehouse downtown, a dilapidated building, forgotten and neglected. I converted it into a workshop, a place where underprivileged kids could come and learn a trade: carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, real skills, skills they could use to build their own futures. I called it the Mary's Legacy Workshop. I found peace there, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and the sound of hammers. I was building something again, something meaningful, something that mattered. I wasn't just building furniture, I was building character. A year passed. It was Thanksgiving again. The air was crisp and cold. I wasn't alone. I wasn't lonely. I was at the workshop, sharing a meal with the kids and the volunteers. The table was long, made of mismatched wood that we had built ourselves. It was full of warmth, full of laughter, full of respect. Sometimes, late at night, when the workshop is quiet, I think about Clara and Emma. Clara tried to reach out a few times, sending letters filled with regret. She said she was working 2 jobs, that she finally understood the value of hard work. She said she finally understood what she lost, but I never responded. Maybe someday I'll be able to forgive her, but the wound is still too deep. The trust is broken. I keep the rocking horse in the corner of the workshop. A reminder that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect. It's about loyalty. It's about love. And a true foundation isn't built on brick and mortar. It's built on the strength of character and the dignity we afford each other. I am Arthur, and I am a builder, and sometimes the hardest thing you have to do is tear down the house you built, so you can build something better in its place. Thanks for listening. Please rate our story in the comments. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. Your support means a lot, because your time matters.